Good afternoon, everybody. This is Lisa, and this is my friend Christy.
Hi.
Christy has very bravely agreed to come talk to you about an experience, a really awful experience, if you ask me, about something I had not even heard of. It's something called C. diff, and it's set off by antibiotics, correct?
You can have C. diff, but the antibiotics causes it to grow very rapidly and become lethal very quickly.
Okay, so start us off. What happened?
Well, I'd been sick for several months, but I had other issues, so I thought that was it. And then I went to see a doctor, and it was my stomach. My stomach was killing me. I was having horrendous side effects, bathroom issues. C. diff is like nothing. On your worst day, times it by 100, and that's how bad C. diff can get with your stomach. And they just decided I had pneumonia, little spots of pneumonia on my lungs, and I kept telling them it wasn't my lungs, it was my stomach that's killing me. They prescribed me antibiotics without looking into what the stomach issue was, and had me come back 2 weeks later. In that 2-week period of time, I couldn't lift myself out of my truck, couldn't pivot to tilt to sit into a wheelchair. I could barely talk. I couldn't hold up my head. And it started my journey of having to go to 4 hospitals in a 3-month time, being on a medically induced coma for 3 weeks, having to go to physical therapy to redevelop all my muscles that had atrophied because this had been going on for so long. And if it wasn't for a nurse noticing I didn't look bad, that I looked really bad, I don't know if I would have made it out of that office that day, because she looked at me and she said, "Are you okay?" And I'm not one for a lot of dramatics, but I looked at her and said, "I'm dying. I am dying." And they took me back to a back room, and they wished a cross over me basically and said, "You're going to the hospital." They treated me for pneumonia and put me into the medically induced coma. And it was the next day they discovered I had C. diff. Now, C. diff you can get from hospitals, not to scare anybody, but it's a very voracious virus. And but I'd had the symptoms for several months before then. I just kept blowing it off.
So did it live in your intestines?
Yes. And
Okay.
you have a wall in between your intestines that can get really thin, and they can pass over it. And the other thing is a lot of antibiotics kill both good and bad bacteria. With C. diff, that causes the bad bacteria to actually grow and flourish, and the good stuff to die off and get overwhelmed, and they can't do anything about it. There's, I believe, 3 medications that they use for it. I don't know of the first one. The second one is vancomycin, and the third one is called Difset, though I hear there might be other ones in the thing. They're very expensive, and they're hard. I was on mine IV treatment for at least, I want to say 2.5 months, 3 months of my entire stay in the hospital, from the time they realized I had it until I was finally cleared of it. And you cannot have doctors, nurses, medical assistants. They all have to come in full gown, mask, gloves. You don't see anybody. You don't really leave your room unless you've got physical therapy and have had your vancomycin for a long time. It's hard to find support groups. There's one on Facebook. If you look for C. diff on Facebook, that's really good. But it's very isolating because you can't go around people. You have to be very careful of everything you do so you don't share it with anybody. And it just, one of my things, as I would say, is if you don't feel like your doctor's hearing you, I'm not saying I'm a doctor, so I do listen to them, but I don't think that if a doctor's not hearing me now, I go to another doctor immediately, because I would never, ever wish C. diff on my worst enemy at all.
So what do you feel that doctor missed that day? You told him that your stomach was hurting, and he went to the pneumonia and dismissed your stomach issues?
Yeah, all because I wasn't running a fever. He said he's not worried about the stomach because I wasn't running a fever. Now, running with fever with C. diff is common, But it's also common not to run fevers when you have viruses and things. For me in particular, I don't run fevers. And so the doctor said, we'll just put this off until you can see your other doctor in 2 weeks. Well, if I'd gone one more day past 2 weeks, I'd probably be dead. There was just no question about that.
And it was all because they decided to treat with antibiotics,
Yes.
which set off the C. diff.
Yeah,
And
standard antibiotics, like there's specific antibiotics out there. Like if you have a UTI now, they have specific antibiotics. When you have C. diff, if you can get a hold of specific antibiotics, if you have to take them, that's always the better route, because it will hit specifically. It's not a broad spectrum. It's not trying to kill everything that comes in contact, good and bad. It's just trying to specifically get like that UTI or the bladder infection and things like that. So that's one thing I'd say is make sure, follow up right away. If you still feel bad and it's your stomach or whatever it is, because the antibiotics can really wreak total havoc in your body and make C. diff look, from what you had at the beginning to what you have at the end, it's totally different. It becomes a monster. And I can't say that you just don't have any control of anything at all. And so it was really hard.
Did you reach a point when you were in the coma, or do you even remember what went on? Did you get to see your family? Or was it just like you were in a coma, couldn't...
I was totally out. Totally out. When I first came back, I'd had a couple of strokes in the coma. And I don't know what it would be. I would hate to remember what it was like in the coma, because it was such... I couldn't move one of my hands. I had to pivot onto a pivot board to get into wheelchairs. I couldn't even stand to pivot. I had to sit to slide in. It took me a while to remember my kids' names. It was really...
That coma really set you back a ways. And what had you done before that, if you don't mind sharing what your profession was?
I was an advocate for special needs families, and I worked in a Head Start program, not in this state, but and I was really around a lot of people, and I enjoyed my work, and that destroyed everything.
You weren't able to do that job anymore?
No, I wasn't able to do it, because you have the side effects that happen, like going to the bathroom and things like that. Those side effects happen for months or years down the road. It's not like, okay, they say the C. diff's gone, life is good. No, it's not. And everything you can do to your body, like vitamins and things like that, I can't take. I have to take larger doses if I want them to even absorb. If they'll absorb, I've had other gastric issues, so it's a catch-22 what's going to work or not. And just C. diff ruins everything. I'm 5 years out now, and I'm now just able to walk a decent amount of time and start doing things out in the community again a little bit. But it takes away your life a lot of ways. It takes away what your normal is.
So if someone were to ask you today, and they said they had a stomach issue, and there's a test for C. diff, correct?
Yes, there is. I'm not sure what the test is, because they did it after I was in the coma.
But you would recommend, if they have any stomach issues at all, perhaps that they would ask for this test?
Yes, I would ask the doctors about getting a test. And just if you have diarrhea, there's an odor associated with it. I was throwing up. Nothing tasted good. Couldn't eat. Had no energy. I mean, losing parts of my hair. There was a lot of things that you don't realize until you have something, I think, like gastric bypass or C. diff. You don't realize how much those small nutrients, like the micronutrients and the vitamins and stuff, really play in you. And now with my doctors, I usually am doing anything and everything I can, like a B12 injection, or I'm doing powders or something, anything to make it the easiest way to digest. And that's why I've been looking into the patches, is because that, for me, would probably be the very best way for me to get my nutrition.
Let me just model that since you brought it up. These are just nutrition 1 by 1 inch patches where you can get the nutrition through the skin, and it bypasses the gut. Mm-hmm. Because for people like us who have had compromised guts, it goes way easier. There's no funky feeling. At least there hasn't. I've not had one, and I can tell my cells are getting back better.
Mm-hmm.
People have told me I almost look like I'm aging backwards. So, yay.
Oh, it's like hearing that.
Yeah, that's good. And there is a way to recover. And some of the things that we've gone through in the last couple of years, I'm not going to mention any names of viruses. Guys, we need to come armed. And I don't mean that in the sense of, but you don't send someone into battle without the proper tools. You don't send someone to go do a job without the proper tools. Our job is to stay healthy. It really is. I'm a Christian. You're a Christian. God, the temple, the body is the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And we can more adequately do God's work when we are feeling better. And it's not to say that God will not use a tragedy, because he certainly does, because you certainly have a story to tell now.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could have avoided this, I'm guessing it's a no-brainer that you obviously would have.
Would have avoided it in a heartbeat. Had I known, I'll be honest, had I known about these patches beforehand, I probably would have been over them. Now, would it have prevented me from getting C. diff? No, but it might have made me a little healthier to fight it better.
Yeah.
Because that was really 3 months of just nonstop fighting.
And your body gets tired from that, and it takes a long time to recover. And you had pneumonia on top of it.
Yeah.
Because we can't forget that's what started the whole thing. And I've had pneumonia, and I can tell you it is a drainer. It just, wow. I felt it like a year later, so I remember that. Is there anything else that you would like people to know about being careful with taking medicine? Just no magic. There are no magic pills. There is a payment for things. But is there anything particular that you've gotten out of this that you feel you could just pass on?
One thing is I've always been very adamant about really talking to my doctors about antibiotics, for example, and I don't take them very often. Well, the one time I took it, and I'm not saying antibiotics is not a treatment for things, but the one time I took it, had I had more fight in me and kept pushing about my stomach issue, they probably would have found out about the C. diff if somebody listened to me, and the very, very last thing they would have ever put me on was anything but the 2 antibiotics I named, because those are the only 2 they know don't work the same way as regular antibiotics. It doesn't feed the C. diff. It doesn't act like it's a fertilizer and everybody's growing out of control. And so
Right.
I would have just been, for years, I've always been, if I can do a patch or something like that, let me do that, because I know how my stomach's going to act, and that'll absorb more of it.
So basically, just have confidence in yourself. And if someone's not listening to you, and it's hard for us as women, because you just sometimes you want to give up and just say forget it. You just you get frustrated. I don't have a lot of patience. You might have more patience than me. I don't have a lot of patience, so I just go whatever. But I've been very fortunate that I have not had to, actually I've seen the PA, but I have not seen my actual doctor here since I've moved here, because I've been able to get better. And I count that as fortunate. But if you don't be afraid to get a second opinion. Do not, this is your body. You've got to live with the consequences.
Yeah.
Okay? So if something's not coming back right, you don't feel like you're being heard, you keep pushing. And you can do it politely. You don't have to be, a witch or anything about it, but you can keep pushing until you get the answers that you feel match your symptoms. Do your own research, though. Look for things on competent sites, medical sites, and be open to what your doctor says. Have them do some research. I don't fully blame my doctor when they didn't really listen to me, and I don't know if you fully blame, because a lot of times they don't get the chance to do the research, but they should take into consideration when you're saying no and when something's not matching the symptoms, because your stomach is most of where your immune system is at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing, and this is just a guess because I am also not a doctor, but I bet you the pneumonia came along because you had the stomach issue and it weakened your system.
Oh yeah, they actually what an infectious disease doctor said that it was actually affecting all my organs and slowly wearing them down because of the C. diff. My body was feeding the C. diff. And sometimes they'd say, well, you got it after you went to the hospital for pneumonia. No, I'd had it. I know I had it at least 6 months beforehand. I just didn't know the name to C. diff. And even back then, 5 years ago, a lot of doctors didn't. C. diff just wasn't that commonly known. And now it's starting to get really, sadly, better known. But yeah, it was not, for me, it was not the hospital I got it from. It was I had it and had to be admitted.
But if you are in a hospital with someone that has it, it could be that is why she had to spend so much time in isolation, which has a mental effect on you. But anyway, I think that's about it for this afternoon. And I want to thank Christy for coming on and being brave enough to talk about something like that, because that experience, having to relive that, I can only imagine it must be traumatizing. But thank you, because I think you will help someone else
I hope
avoid what you went through.
I really hope so.
All right. So shall we say goodbye?
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.